Hi, everyone. Welcome to Talking Headless. I believe it's episode 8. Don't hold me to it, though. Subject today is going to be Salesforce, and of course, what I really, as we'll see later. And I think there's two things you need to notice. One is I actually do have a head, so the name is meant to be funny, okay? And number two is I'm going to be glancing kind of over there on occasion. And the reason I'll be doing that is I'm testing out it's not a teleprompter where I'm reading a script or anything like that. It's more of a remind me of the things I need to talk about. I just want you to know all of this comes with age. So you're all going to be using teleprompters and reminding people you have a head later. All right. So we're going to get into it today. Our subject for today, of course, is our friends at Salesforce. And the reason I'm using Salesforce as the company I want to go through today is because Dreamforce just happened, and Dreamforce actually represents an important evolutionary step for Salesforce. Normally, when I'm speaking about companies, the conference is just one aspect of the company. It's not the whole thing by a long shot. But in this case, Dreamforce represented a key, I'll call it on the one hand, evolution, on the other hand, a refocus and a kind of a return to core values for Salesforce. Look, you go back to 1999, Salesforce was built on a core value even then, which was trust. And one of the things, as you know, I've been preaching for years is that companies not only need to be or have the capabilities to produce what individuals or other companies need to get a job done, but they also have to be the trusted advisor for those companies, for the prospects, and even for people who may never buy anything for them. And Salesforce had that role for years. It's one of the reasons that they were by far the most rapidly growing enterprise in business technology, probably in history. However, in the beginning of this year, you'll note that they kind of started to lose trust. I mean, there were a number of things that did that. First, over a longer period of time, they began getting what people thought is relatively expensive. They had a much, much, much larger portfolio that covered an enormous range of of capabilities, and people got confused by that. And at the same time, earlier this year, after all these years of Ohana, they laid off. Ultimately, it was 12,000 people, right? And they lost the trust of a lot of the population out there. Then, to compound it, not only did they handle the layoffs not all that well, although to their credit, they've been doing a lot to fix that. They also began immediately speaking, after all these years of talking about stakeholders, they began talking shareholder lingo. Like we're all about profit. We're all about efficiency, and so on and so forth. And look, there's nothing wrong with that if you're addressing shareholders. That's what they're there for. I mean, and it's kind of what a business is there to do. It's there to make money and be profitable and meet the needs of the people who have spent their good dollars on it. However, Salesforce has always put itself forward as a stakeholder company, which meant that the employees, the customers, those people out there who just felt that there was something greater than that with Salesforce, were not only disappointed, but were set back. And the blowback on Salesforce was enormous. Now, that said, their stock price did fairly well because of the messaging around profitability and efficiency, and that's what we're all about, and so forth. However, the requirement by Salesforce to regain trust in the industry before ultimately they began receding, because it would have happened, was first and foremost what they had to do. And along comes another thing that kind of imposes itself, or had begun imposing itself late last year, which was not AI per se, but Gen AI, and thus a huge renewed interest in AI itself. And Gen AI became it's not just the topic of the day. I mean, originally When we first all heard it, we thought, okay, hype, something like that. But it was way more than that. And now the use cases are being developed and the use it, and it's being used in productive ways. And every company had to get on board with that, including Salesforce. And it was an important decision on the part of Salesforce, was given that they were a very early investor in AI, on how they were going to rejigger the company itself. Were they going to become an AI company, or are they going to become a company that built AI into everything they did? Now, then along comes Dreamforce, and questions begin to get answered by watching Dreamforce. If you talk to almost every analyst who was there, including me, it was a very important Dreamforce, and it was also one of the best Dreamforces they've done in years. And the reason was they got rid of a lot of the woohoo stuff, the wow stuff, and they began saying, look, we can provide you with what you need, and you can trust us as your advisor and provider to do what we have to do. And that message came across really clearly in almost every facet that every facet of that event, and thus how deeply reinculcated it was into the actual culture of the company once again. Mark Benioff in his keynote did a couple of things that I thought were extremely important. One of the first things he did was to reestablish that the core value of the company from the beginning had always been trust. Okay. And that from that standpoint, you could trust Salesforce to do what it promises to do. The second thing they did was they basically decided to, once again, at the beginning of the Dreamforce itself, talk about the good that they did, the public service they provided, the charitable investments they made, the work with the not for profits. And there'll be a link in the show notes for this show on one video of a blind individual who created a institute for blind people that Salesforce and for blind people's employment in the tech world, that Salesforce has been instrumental in making a successful organization to help those who are physically handicapped, right? So what you have Salesforce doing again is establishing the culture as a culture that cares, as a culture that's trusting, as a culture that's trusted. Okay, those two things are important. The other thing, and this is going to sound a little harsh, is they didn't really emphasize Ohana, and that's a good thing. Look, the blowback on the layoffs was enormous with Salesforce. And for them it would be a bit disingenuous for them to come out and just make like nothing had changed. For the first time in probably a decade, that lovely older couple from Hawaii wasn't out there doing their introduction to the event. And again, no disrespect intended for them. They seem to be a lovely couple, but that was a good thing. Meaning Salesforce was saying, look, we know we have to regain your trust, and we're going to do everything in our power to do that. All right. So why that though? I mean, why was Salesforce pushing efficiency and pushing profit? It wasn't, oh my God, we hired 10, 12, 15,000 more people than we should have, which they apparently think they did. But also, I think they were a little frightened of the activist investors who were out there trying to push their agendas into Salesforce, and they're afraid of losing control of the company. I mean, things like that were going on that basically pushed them much more toward a hardcore kind of shareholder value view. But now they've begun to even reevaluate that. And a couple of things have indicated that in terms of Salesforce itself. On the corporate side, one, they're rehiring 3,300 plus people, many of whom they're calling boomerang hires, meaning that people, as Mark actually put it, people we probably shouldn't have laid off in the first place, right? And they're starting to rehire people back. Secondly, they hired a number of senior executives who had been there years ago when Salesforce was beginning its massive growth, but at the same time were a group of executives who are committed to the ideals that Salesforce also carry, as well as uh, the the execution of the technology and the development of technology. Third, and I think this is really an important mini messaging, profitability and efficiency has been replaced with productivity as part of the message, which of course implies profitability and efficiency without being a shareholder value word, and much more a stakeholder value word that also encompasses employees of companies too. All of those things are really very important. And the other thing they've done, and this is where the technology actually begins to come in, and this is really, really important, is that they've begun pushing Gen AI as basically an AI really as a platform layer. Now, understand something with Salesforce. Historically, everything was a cloud. It's just like the way they viewed the world was in clouds. And, they had so many clouds that, to be honest, made no sense to me at all as clouds. Um, like they had an NFT cloud for a while, which has mercifully disappeared, given that I think 95% of NFTs have been proven to be completely valueless by a recent study that Brent Leary noted in one of his posts on LinkedIn. Um, so you had this enormous shift, right, where Salesforce is now talking platform layer, right? And that's really important. AI became a platform layer, especially Gen AI. But more importantly, the one thing that distinguished them from almost anybody else is Salesforce developed what they call a trust layer through the use of Gen AI. We've all been talking about RAG and guardrails and watching out for fraud and poison and so on and so forth inside that, and hallucination. When it comes to Gen AI, Salesforce has actually developed a very, very tightly and well done technology layer that handles that. What looks to be extremely well. They've thought of all bases. I can't go into a great deal of detail now, just in the interest of time, but ultimately, what Salesforce has done here is they've they've on the one hand distinguished themselves in the world of AI and Gen AI. On the other hand, they've also built something that Michael Wu, and you've seen him speak with us on multiple other shows. If you're interested in more details, go see the Pros Outperform interview we did with Michael, and also Michael's presentation at Pros Outperform this year. I highly recommend it if you want to understand the idea of how to create guardrails around Gen AI hallucinations. So Salesforce has built that layer, okay? And not only have they built it, it's in production. This is not a promised layer. It's not coming sometime in the future that we can't identify. It's in GA. It's happening now. You can use it, okay? And that's really important. The other thing, though, that's important to that is it sustains and supports the rejuvenation of the corporate narrative that Salesforce has always built itself on, which is we are a company that you can trust to do something. Now, that something might be provide you with a technology. It might be to do do public service. It might be to provide you with a culture that you can feel part of and engaged with. It might be all of that. But what it isn't is um, a well, let me rephrase it. What they've done is they've thrown out a few years that where they were just starting to divert from that and divert toward what ultimately led to the uh, explosion and blow up and blow back they got in the spring of this year. So we're seeing Salesforce begin to evolve really well. And one of the other things that I thought was really important around the event itself that also indicated that, and also is the reemergence of Parker Harris. Look, I mean, Parker's been on the stage, but he's always played kind of a minor role over the last few years, which is ridiculous given that he's the co-founder of the company and also an extraordinary person who without which that company would not survive. Right. And so he played a significant role during the keynote this year. It was wonderful to see him. I always kudos to Parker. I think the guy is an amazing human being at every level. And I am very glad to see him get back to the level that he belongs in to. The other thing which they did, and goes to something Brent and I talk about quite a bit, is they actually began understanding what a hybrid event should be. Look, me, Brent, John Reed, even more so than us, have been examining how do you live in a world where a hybrid existence is the existence. It's part virtual and part IRL in real life. And now, we've been talking about events that just didn't work very well when it came to hybrid, meaning the virtual experience just did not distinguish itself in any way from the real life experience, and it didn't work virtually. Good example was HubSpot's conference this year. Did not work virtually at all. Salesforce managed to do it quite well. If you looked at the virtual experience online and you looked at the real life experience, while they were compatible, meaning you were getting the same content, the look was somewhat different. The only thing I would suggest to Salesforce for next year, and this is not going to be part of the what should they be doing, this is just an event specific thing, or all events though, is they needed to step up the level of actual audience engagement on a virtual stage. The best example of how to do that is Creatio. And if you watch Creatio's launch of their Freedom Release 8.0, you'll see it, where these senior executives didn't just get off the stage and be done. They got off the stage and went to they went to the chat window related to the stage, and they began interacting with the people in that comment window back and forth. So there was an actual dialogue going on between senior execs and the audience. And I think that's the one downside I would say is there. But on the other hand, and Brent made note of this too, which I thought was really important, was the camera shots, the use of the cameras on the actual content slides and demos and so on and so forth, just worked for a virtual audience in a different way, but as well as a physical audience. And that's because Salesforce Plus over the last year plus has also decided to kind of shift its strategy to a little less network, although they're still doing that, to a little more event focus. And in Dreamforce, you can see the impact Salesforce Plus had on it throughout the whole thing. Now, what is the overall thing going on with Salesforce now? As I said, they're starting to make the boomerang hires they have to make to regain trust. They've had always, under the guidance of John Tashik, they've always had a powerful outreach program. I mean, super powerful. They're the best enterprise level AR team in the business, without not even close, really, to be honest. There are some small ones that might compete with them for the best, but they're much smaller programs. But as far as Salesforce goes, the team with Ann Chen and Kathleen Obata, and I mean, there's a lot of them, so I'm not going to go through them, but that team is extraordinary, right? And they've never wavered for a second on that. The other thing that they've done, which is that by remembering their origins, the culture has begun to reshift back again, okay, to how they began their life. We are a company that values trust as the first and foremost thing we have to value. So we're beginning to see, I'll call it a renaissance, but it's really a renewal of Salesforce. And I'm very, very happy for that, because they're obviously been a market leader forever, and will continue to be. But there are things they need to do, and I want to take a look at those. So what is it that Salesforce actually needs to do? Well, the overall themes we see here, obviously, regain trust, which we've already talked about. They also have to re-engage with the corporate narrative, which was trust, and return to their roots, which was trust. All right, but what does that mean in specific? All right, it means, look, obviously, it's great to have the ain't we fun to be around perspective, but ultimately they need to go with you can trust us continually. And that literally, that's not a theme that stops with the San Francisco event. That's a theme that goes to forever with Salesforce. You can trust us. It doesn't mean don't have fun, but that fun is focusing on the quality of the culture and the public service they do. Look, do not ever underestimate things like, and you might actually, right, underestimate this, but don't underestimate things like the golden hoodie, right? That may seem stupid and ridiculous to a lot of people and a direct ripoff from America's Got Talent, but it means something to the people who win it. It means something to the audience. It makes them feel good about being part of a culture that actually embraces their successes as and embraces them as part of its own. That is a very important kind of thing. Even though it might seem like an artifice or kind of a cheesy, it's not in the slightest. Then, of course, Salesforce needs to continue to show what it does when it comes to public service. They should, in fact, be doubling down on that. Now, that seems like a contradiction to the first thing I said, which is don't be ain't we got fun, but be you can trust us. But it's not at all. Those are the things where the engagement level supports you can trust us. You can not only trust us as a company to do what you ask and to protect you where we can protect you, but you can trust us as a company where the culture is meaningful and at the same time you can feel as part of something greater. The other side is to more fully integrate the AI via the platform, which they're already doing, but focus the messaging a little bit more. Maybe maybe one of the things they can do is just respell their name. They can become Salesforce. See, get it? AI. And then they can invest in the America's Cup. And for those of you who don't know, that you see that first little boat there, that little black boat, that's Oracle, right? That's Oracle's boat. So, of course, I'm joking, not. But that is something I think that would be mission critical for them to do, right? The other thing, though, when it comes to AI, is they should generate a lot more use cases than they have. They have some, and the way they tended to focus on the case study during the event was kind of interesting. They focused almost on one, really, Williams-Sonoma, and they kind of ran all the way through its use of Salesforce and its platforms. And and Salesforce made a very important point about the use of data and data cloud with the AI platform, the Einstein One platform, and they did a good job with that. Where they didn't do a great job, and I think they need to just get with the fact that this is the way the world's going, because companies like Oracle and others are doing a very good job here, is start developing some industry-specific small language models. Or another example, somebody brought up a point that I think might have been either at Oracle or at Dreamforce, I don't remember, but where maybe you can extract and create from large language models industry-specific models. I think they were called ILMs, industry language models. But start working harder on the industry side. Now, are they? I don't know. Maybe they are. That would be another thing. The other thing is, don't underestimate Slack here. Because look, the other aspect of what Salesforce has to continue to do to not just regain trust, but to evolve the trust, is to be the collaborative platform that companies like Adobe and others have already developed in different ways. Adobe has Behance, which is a community, and Slack has that capability. And with the inculcation of Gen AI and other things into it, it's a cool platform, but start bringing it up front. A lot of us recognized last year, for example, digital headquarters as being a really important breakthrough for Slack. Slack gets some due, but it never gets its full due. I think they need to be much more out front. The other thing I think they're going to need to do, and this just comes from observation, even though it might not seem related, it is the UI UX is serviceable, but it's nowhere near what the standard in the industry is, which would be Redwood at Oracle or Creatio's actual UI UX, which is actually borderline beautiful. Finally, I'd say, well, two things actually, one which is not up here. Stay on the theme of productivity, right? Not efficiency, not profitability. Get back to your stakeholders. The shareholders are stakeholders, okay? They are part of it. They're an important part of it. recognize them maybe more than you did historically, but productivity actually provides you with a theme that encompasses both all groups of stakeholders that you can imagine, including the shareholders. Productivity leads to revenue, leads to profitability, leads to efficiency, et cetera, and in the meantime means that each individual is better at what they do in a more effective way. So stick with that theme. Finally, highly recommend you read a article that Rebecca Wedeman wrote in Our Player in Residence, and will be part of a new show as yet to be named in the fall. Rebecca Wedeman wrote in Diginomica, I think it was yesterday it came out, on the Salesforce customer success programs. This is more of a cautionary look. Customer success needs a re-emphasis at Salesforce. That is happening. However, one of the KPIs historically at Salesforce that diminished the program was they added revenue objectives to customer success. Now, there are paid levels of customer success programs. There's 3 levels. One's free, the other 2 are paid. However, if revenue by account becomes a KPI there, it undercuts the value of customer success. Now, if they've gotten rid of it, kudos to you. Thank you. I'm very happy you did that. If you haven't, get rid of it now. All right. So that's Salesforce. Congratulations to Salesforce. Welcome back into the fold, right? Trust is the core value. It's the corporate narrative, and it's the technological differentiator you do have here. These are all the things you can do to re-engage the people whose trust you lost, who's regain that trust, and then evolve the company along that theme and still be one of the fastest growing companies in the world. All right. So with that, we're going to take leave of Salesforce, and we're going to go to the newest, I like this better than Stump the Godfather, Brent. I'm sorry. This is my favorite. This is called Something I Really. And this is something I like, something I really dislike, and something I really like. So let's start with something I really dislike. Any company that says we are the only, right? You're not the only. I can promise you that. And as I have said a million times, unless you've invented a new element for the periodic tables, which apparently will be number 119, you are not the only, right? If you're smart, you'll say we're one of the, or we are doing this look, every single time, and I have done this, I've challenged the company to tell me, how do you know that? They don't. They just say it, right? And guess what? While the watch list existed, if I ever saw you say we are the only in one of your submissions, you were dinged with a subtraction on your final score. And in one case, it lost you. I won't say who because it'd be embarrassing, but it lost you the watch list winner because it was enough to take away the threshold to win. So, not that I think that's a heavy consequence for life particularly, but at the same time, understand you are not the only. All right. Now, and next time I do this, maybe I'll have some sound effects to make it either cheesier or cooler. We'll see. Now, like my friends in the industry, look, guys, I'm 73 years old. I am trying to retire. I am working my way through it. Does that mean I'll be non-existent? No. When I sunset the watch list, it looked like I had literally must have passed away by the way people were talking about it. But the reality is, I got into this. I'm not a business person. Which some of you may find ironic because I gather you consider me a business guru. But the reality is, I'm not. I never have been. I've never even liked business particularly. But what I've always liked and always really, what I used to like about CRM and why I liked it was because my original definition was it's the only science of business that attempts to reproduce an art of life, and that's how humans behave. And it meant that it was a right-brained kind of business science. And I really, it's not anymore, but I really liked it for that reason. Over the past decade plus, I've made a lot of great friends, obviously Brent and Esteban and Dennis, and look, you see an array, and there's a lot of people on that I didn't put on, literally because A, I didn't have any room, B, I couldn't even find a decent picture, right? So I just threw up this group here. And you'll note, by the way, that of course, one of the most important ones is in just about the dead center, me, Ann Chen, and of course, Minnie. That is Minnie. Okay, for those of you, there's Minnie, and when I actually met her in real life, I was leaning in and pointing, but that doesn't help you much since you can't see what I'm pointing at. But my friends are what and who I value, and what and who I'm in this for. I'm not in it for any other reason, really. I love the people you see here and others here. I mean, some of these people are no longer even in the industry, but I'm still in touch, right? So understand, this is, if I really call this what I hate and love, this is who I love. All right. So thank you to all of you for and again, this is not a goodbye or swan song. Okay. I'm just thanking you. Okay. But thank you to all of you for just allowing me to be your friend. And I think really that's it for the month. We're done for another month. So with that, I'd like to say you're great people. Goodbye. And I'll see you next time. Mashed up, broken into two. I didn't know I was pretty till I took a look at you and I'm rolling. Yeah, I'm still rolling. Baby, there ain't nothing I can lose, and I sure got the blues. Hey!
This has been a Players Productions Network digital broadcast.